Hello everyone, and welcome to the long-awaited next clan video for Vampire the Masquerade. A clan which you will meet a lot in Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2, the clan that you've met in Bloodlines 1 as well, and Redemption, and I think most of the Vampire the Masquerade lore has something about us. Clan NOSFERATU. Now, you may see that I don't actually look like Count Orlok from the 1920s movie, the Nosferatu, right? That's because I don't really have to. We come in all shapes and sizes, and as much as me being in the streets looking like this doesn't exactly break the masquerade, if someone who knew me before my embrace and saw me a week later looking like this, they would be probably very much terrified. And that's ultimately what being a Nosferatu is. We go for the embrace. That is extremely painful. We suffer for weeks when our beautiful young body slowly deforms itself into this. Suddenly we look like we had some birth defects, or we look very old, or we grow some cancer-like growths and leper-like sores. You don't want to know what's under this shirt, baby. Anyway, with this face, I could use some, I don't know, prosthetics, maybe some heavy makeup, and I would look kinda okay. And that's because I was embraced just a little while ago. And I think my sire wasn't exactly very potent, because the ones with the higher blood potency, oh yeah, they look pretty bad, let me tell you. So ultimately, being a Nosferatu, you can have bat-like ears and face like a freaking crocodile, and you may walk like a walking spawn of Cthulhu, like it's possible. But it's often a case for those whose blood potency is higher. I would say that if you see a truly deformed and malformed Nosferatu, you should probably be aware that they might be more powerful than you. Ultimately, in the new system, Vampire the Masquerade V5, Nosferatu no longer break the masquerade by just showing themselves to the kind. Back in the days it was the case, and well, it was a pretty severe bane if we think about it. Naturally, you can still play a Nosferatu who is that much deformed, it is possible, and it is mentioned in the system. Your blood potency especially heightens your bane, and you are able to look even more monstrous the more potent your blood is. Think about being embraced and looking like that, and then I suddenly go on a diablerie spree, and suddenly I grow huge fangs or something. That would be pretty cool. Anyway, all Nosferatu are repulsive. Their embrace is extremely painful, and it leads them to look very, very ugly. And you could say that because their looks made them stand out so much. They are kinda hunted by everyone, and they were forever. Hence why they probably survive like cockroaches, hidden under the ground very often, hidden in catacombs, in tombs, in abandoned buildings, in the sewers, of course. Because ultimately everyone is onto us. Other vampires, they often don't like us. Camarilla, Anarch, Sabat, we have friends and enemies everywhere. Humans, well, Second Inquisition has a pretty easy job to find us too. And we are even hunted by the worst of them all, our own fucking Antediluvian. And let me tell you, this is the thing that most of the Nosferatu fear the most. So coming back to the history lesson, the Antediluvian of Clan Nosferatu is called Absimiliard. And if you'd see him before this whole curse shenanigans, you would probably assume that he is actually the Antediluvian of Clan Toreador. Beautiful, vain. He was also a very skilled and stealthy hunter. And it's his hunting skills that made his future sire, Zila, fell in love with him, you could say. Well, there was some fascination in there for sure. Zila, a very beautiful vampire of second generation, known to be the first wife of Cain. Her heart was inflamed by the skills of Absimiliard, and she chased him to eventually embrace him. But the struggle of the embrace left Absimiliard with a small scar on his face. You know, it could have been just a little cut on his cheek. But because of Absimiliard's vanity and because of his obsession of beauty, yep, just like Toreador's, he was livid about it. And he never forgave Zila what she has done. His vanity led him to the obsession that eventually resulted in him willing to kill Zila more than anything in the world. And so he became the leading figure in the grand slaughtering of the second generation, which of course was very much disliked by Mr. Cain, who cursed him by twisting his visage in the grotesque mockery of a human being, which was a kind of fitting punishment for killing beautiful Zila. Now, after that, Absimiliard gave birth to two bloodlines, unwillingly. I mean, he did sire his fierce childer, thinking that they all will be bloodbound to him, and will help him in seeking this revenge he wanted so badly. But his childer separated into two groups, one group who was bloodbound to him and was the same angry, and the second one which escaped the bond. And the second one is actually the origins of the clan Nosferatu as we know it nowadays. We don't really know who was the original sire who started the bloodline. It was either Medusa, known also as Gorgon or Matriarch, or Baba Yaga, the same one that you heard about in kids' stories and fairy tales, the one that ate children. I think she was busy enough as a vampire to bother with eating children, but nonetheless. They escaped the bloodline from Absimiliard and started the bloodline of Nosferatu. But Absimiliard himself wanted, and still wants apparently, this whole bloodline to die. And that's why the first bloodline, the childer who were at first bloodbound to him and continued with his rage and vengeance and everything, are called Niktuku. And Niktuku are the same deformed and malformed as Nosferatu, but they have a very specific curse. See, they do not sate their hunger on the blood of kine. They have to drink the blood from other vampires, and they very often pick other Nosferatu, willing to drain them all dry and destroy them in the name of Absimiliard. Niktuku were very often perceived as the legends of Clan Nosferatu. Other clans thought that Nosferatus are just obsessive and paranoid, and that's why they made up Niktuku, but throughout the ages it turned out that, whoops, they actually exist. We don't really know what's their state nowadays though, if they still exist, or did we actually deal with them all? Hopefully. But they did exist nonetheless, and maybe somewhere in the sewers, in the deep forests, caves, or wherever, the remains of the bloodline called Niktuku can still dwell somewhere. Anyway, speaking of the history lesson, let's go back to the ancient times, which were pretty bad for Clan Nosferatu. We didn't have many places to hide except for the natural places like caves or whatever, but caves are usually far away from civilization and it's kinda hard to feed, of course if you don't really treat animals as the best diet for yourself. So what Clan Nosferatu did back in those days is they very often actually lived in rivers. Nile or Tigris, you could just stay underwater, and when the fishermen came to get some fish, or when people were trying to get some water for their households, we were just snatching them and drinking them, and yeah, it was pretty cool. Hence why so many legends about these rivers at night. Mothers were telling their children not to go to the Nile at night because a big crocodile might go out and eat you. I'm quite sure it was not a crocodile, it was actually one of us, but you know, we probably did look similar, so. Least to speak, we weren't really invited to courts or to any important gatherings. We were the lowest of the low in this vampire society. Looking like this, we couldn't really pose as anyone important. Although it was apparently a little bit different in Africa, where Nosferatu very quickly rise to power and prominence, starting a bloodline called Guruhi, which for a long time ruled Africa, and withstand the Ventru who tried to snatch it away from them. The low clan status continued throughout the medieval times, but at least then our situation improved a bit. See, we found ways on how to get our revenge against those snotty Camarilla princes and all the people that didn't want us in their courts. Because Nosferatu of the medieval times very quickly combined the human waste with the cause of the plague, and they knew perfectly well how to defile the waters of the domains of particularly cocky Camarilla princes. Causing a lot of deaths, I guess, but you know, that's the price for vengeance. Anyway, in the medieval ages, Nosferatu could slowly emerge to the ground and stop hiding in the natural confinement, so to speak. Because they could hide among the beggars, among the ones with leprosy, in the filth of the streets, surrounded by corpses dying from plague. Nosferatu would kinda blend in, and they did, feeding usually from those who were very close to dying. But I would say that maybe somewhere then the praised Nosferatu's empathy started. Because they were the outcasts of the kindred society, they felt an empathy with the outcasts of the human society. And even up until today, Nosferatu very often, from the shadows, quietly support homeless shelters and support the beggars around them. This is why they are very often perceived to be the most empathetic and the most beautiful within clans of all Vampire the Masquerade. It's so sweet that the Toreador had to come up with it. But it's not entirely true, but we're going to talk about it later. Anyway, the Sabbat and Camarilla split happened, and Nosferatu anti-tribute did happen, although they weren't so numerous. Nosferatu always felt the most cozy within the Camarilla. If they had a weight, and on one side they had ruling over Kine, and on the other hiding from Kine, they would pick the hiding. Some say that it's because of the cowardice, some say that it's because they're actually smart. Anyway, Nosferatu anti-tribute, the ones who joined Sabbat, are a rare case of being identical to their Camarilla counterparts, and they actually don't hate each other that much as other anti-tribute versus Camarilla versions of clans. That's because Nosferatu value the allegiance to their clan more than the allegiance to the faction. Of course, they can still hate singular members of their clan, or they may still plot against each other, sure, but ultimately the loyalty to their clan is bigger than to the faction. And coming back to the timeline, after medieval times the Renaissance happened, and the urbanization caused Nosferatu to find their little ways in the cities. Ghettos and tenement houses, places where the poor people lived usually, were the perfect urban lairs for the clan, and allowed them to live closer to humans again. Renaissance is also the period in which a lot of embraces out of spite started to happen, with all those people who were dwelling in art and beauty and creating beautiful things. Nosferatu started to pick these people and embrace them into their clan, defiling their beauty. Probably because of the deeply ingrained jealousy that they did inherited from their antediluvian. And the times unfortunately started to get closer and closer to Victorian era, which was the era of the biggest exile of the Nosferatu clan. The era of beauty, the era where Toreadors were the highest in society and were revered by many, caused Nosferatu to diminish in numbers greatly and caused them to be absolutely invisible in the courts, in Elysiums. Not that they were very much invited there before, but that time they just weren't there. But Victorian age brought one thing for Clan Nosferatu that literally saved their asses many times among the history, and that is the sewers. Once the cities started to develop their vast undergrounds, Nosferatus finally had a place to live. They didn't have to rely on these natural resources again, or they didn't have to rely on trying to blending in with Kine. That was the perfect place, infested with rats that you can easily eat from, with a very easy access to various city parts, and of course protected from the sun. That's why sewers up until today are very much known to be Nosferatu's favorite. Whenever you have anything underground the city, it's just the place that you will for sure meet some of the Gnosis. Or maybe they will meet you, you won't see them because they will be obfuscating. In the modern ages, the fear against the antediluvian of Clan Nosferatu grew bigger than ever. That's because of the Cold War and because of the rise of internet, which of course caused the information to flow more freely. And any little tidbits, any little chances, any little conspiracy theories of Absimiliard coming back and seeking his vengeance against the clan, well, it really started to have its impact on Nosferatu's imagination. Maybe that's why they became ultimately the clan who was known of gathering the most information and keeping the tabs on absolutely everything. All the rumors, all the gossips, the information kept from others, the secrets. Nosferatu started to become specialists in gathering, archiving, and keeping it all to themselves, and only selling that for bigger secrets. They were the authors of the information-sharing network called Shreknet, which was a very highly encrypted, internet-based network, which helped Camarilla exchange information with each other. A lot of the Nosferatu became hackers, they became the IT specialists, because from the underground, with a good internet connection, they could have the access to the whole world. They didn't have to go out anymore. They didn't have to show their hideous faces to people. Why go to Elysium if you can read online everything that happened in the Elysium? Unfortunately, the Shreknet got hacked. All these crafty little humans trying to get a hand on the technology ultimately turned out to be better than very often elder vampires who didn't know how to catch up to the modern technology that well. which caused the Shreknet wipe, which was ordered by the Camarilla. Every information had to be erased. Nosferatu did survive from that without many casualties. They managed to wipe everything before the Second Inquisition got to the deepest tidbits that would reveal their location, for example. But what didn't survive that much was their reputation. And in the modern days, Nosferatu have to rebuild the reputation of not only the information gatherers and sharers, but the clan who is reliable in what they are doing. And you could think that because of looking like this and a very visible curse, they would be the easiest target for the Second Inquisition nowadays. Well, they are and they aren't at the same time. You see, because of their malformed visage, Nosferatu do very often surround themselves with the sick, the drug addicts, the beggars. The book says that a Nosferatu with a caved-in nose and bleeding gums would fit better into a meth rehab center than they would a champagne and caviar party in a penthouse suite. Well, they're not very often invited to the fancy parties for sure, but because of the fact that nowadays they can blend in with the kind pretty well, any Second Inquisition attacks on the modern Nosferatu would cause a lot of collateral damage to the kind. Try to kill that one bum who looks like a vampire, you can kill a lot of other bums who just look like they have leprosy. So yeah, as I said before, that because of our malformed visage, we are kind of believed to be the more compassionate and beautiful within of the clans, helping the homeless, helping the shelters, feeding very often on animals because it's the best resource in the sewers. So we're not hurting kind, so we're better than others, so we should be more human than others, shouldn't we? Well, it's not entirely true. I mean, yeah, sure, there are a lot of Nosferatu who are like that, and I would say that it is very often that when you will meet vampires of various clans, you have a bigger chance of meeting a trustworthy Nosferatu than a trustworthy Toreador, of course. But other clans do believe that mostly because we send to Elysiums the most charismatic, the most talkative and extroverted ones of us. The ones who kind of behave like animals and are almost completely overtaken by their beasts and haven't talked to any human being for decades. We keep them in the sewers, and they do exist, and there are a lot of them. They're a part of the family, we treat them like good brothers and sisters, but yeah, we don't send them out. Anyway, nowadays a lot of Nosferatu do use dating apps even. Would you believe that? It's called catfishing. We just use the pictures of other people we find online. There's a lot of stock websites nowadays. Have you seen them? You can just use a picture. Or you can of course go on a social media and take a picture of a jock that you went to the class in high school with and use it on your Tinder app or whatever. And then once you were supposed to meet in the dark alley somewhere, of course, you have a free dinner for yourself. But back to the meat of the whole lore. When it comes to factions, we were originally very much tied with the Camarilla, and I guess we still are. After Camarilla started to really tighten the noose behind everyone's necks, saying that people need to be more faithful to them and demanding a lot of things from us and the other clans, we did say to Bruja and Gangrel, who yeeted out to the Anarchs, that we're going to join them too because Camarilla is horrible. But then we kind of betrayed them because we realized that with all those lower peeps out of the Camarilla, there is a big hole to fill. They still need those lower clan members to deal with the filth and the dirt and the information gathering and whatever. So we were like, we're actually gonna stay within the Camarilla, and that was a good decision ultimately. We need to rebuild what we've lost during the Shreknet wipe. Plus, we're safer within their grounds. Now, of course, not all of us prefer to be safe. Some of us are, proud enough to really dislike the fact that in Camarilla we are considered basically rats. We're at the bottom. We're not very often picked to be the princess, for example. Although it's not always because of the general political climate, it's very often because we just don't want to have any responsible functions that may put a gun to our head. Because we are survivals, cockroaches, as I told you. But there are some of us who we call the Red Nosferatu that join the Anarchs nowadays because they want to be treated equal. They feel like they are too low in the hierarchy of the Camarilla to ever feel equal, and that's why they desert and that's why they are considered the betrayers of the clan, going to the Anarchs. Naturally, we don't really treat them as betrayers that much, again, loyalty to the clan before loyalty to the factions. But most of us do prefer the safety, little cozy space within the camp. Again, is this because we're cowards? I don't think so, it's because we're smart. At the end of the nuclear war that is upon us, apparently our antediluvian Absimiliard, he wants to nuke us one day, so just saying. The only ones that will remain will be cockroaches, rats and Nosferatu. That's at least what we're inclined to believe. So the archetypes of embraces of Clan Nosferatu changed over the years. Back in the days, we were talking about the step up and step down, and Bloodlines 1 actually shows it very well. If you remember the game, there were two Nosferatu characters there that you could meet in the sewers. One of them was called Mitnick, and he was the hacker, and one of them was Emalia, who was the ex-model. So when you talk to Mitnick, you actually realize that he was ugly when he was alive. He was no one, really. He tried to be a hacker, he attempted a lot of big hacks, and one day he actually got into the Shreknet, which caused him to be embraced into Clan Nosferatu. And he loved every single part of it, because he finally got access to all this information, and he finally got all this network of friends and a place to stay. And it was so much better than being an ugly looking student in the little rented apartment who tries to pursue his hacking career. So that is the step up, and a lot of Nosferatu were embraced as a step up. So you take the people from the lowest sides of society and you lift them up by making them eternal, by giving them all this knowledge. And then you have the step down ones, which we called Cleopatras. We take beautiful people, we take models, actresses, we take singers, musicians, celebrities, people you would know from the covers of the newspapers and magazines. And we embrace them into deformed, ugly creatures that could never see the sun again. Cleopatras, on one hand, live a very, very sad and horrible life after the embrace. Think about Emalia. But on the other hand, the energy they have, that they invest in their possible vengeance, if this energy is targeted in the correct way, it can really help the cause of the clan. But ultimately, of course, their embraces are very often just very cruel jokes. Nowadays, of course, there are a lot more archetypes. We do embrace people from all types, kinds, levels of society. And the V5 book talks about these kinds of archetypes. The Information Hub, which is a Nosferatu who tries to rebuild this reputation of Nosferatu as the information brokers. They try to rebuild what once was known as Shreknet, and they are serving as the ones who gather information and sell them to the others. Then you have the Domin Gamshu, which is an archetype of a Nosferatu who's not afraid to break into places, to get into the all possibly dirtiest places in the city, just to gather that one last piece of puzzle. The investigators, the detectives of the underground, very often embraced from the real-life detectives, or from the police officers, or from anyone who seeks justice or knowledge about the case. They are very often helpful for the princes in the domain, or anyone who offers the right price. Then you have more animal than men, Nosferatu who feel more connected to animals than to kine. They often live underground or in secluded places, surrounded by the animals of their preference. Sometimes they even become one with the hives or with the swarms of rats. There are reports of Nosferatu who had hives of bees in their intestines, or their own bodies were actually places for rats to rest, crawling through the holes in their body and feeding on the vitae on the go. Another archetype, interesting one, is the Hunter of Monsters, Nosferatu who value the discipline of potence more than any other, because Nosferatu can also be very, very strong, something that a lot of vampires forget about. And the Hunter of Monsters is a Nosferatu who resorts to the physical violence more than to any other ways of dealing with a particular situation. They might be hired as sheriffs, they might be hired as the security guys for other vampires, or they may seek their own private vengeance and justice with their fists. Last but not least, the archetype of a rat. Now, not exactly the animalistic rat, but the archetype of a character who behaves like the stereotypical rat, serving as a spy or pretending that he's actually part of the Camarilla while actually selling all the information to anarchs, little deceiving creatures who stick to the shadows and try to survive life in the best way known to them, which is deceit. The disciplines that Clan NOSFERATU has are animalism, obfuscate, and potence. Now, all of these disciplines have a particular flavor when it comes to Clan NOSFERATU. For example, animalism, of course, helps them feed in the sewers or helps them feed without any contact with the kine. They can just summon a pigeon and feed from a pigeon and ignore meeting with kine forever if they prefer to. A NOSFERATU can have his or her own famulus, which is a blood-bound pet, a little ghoul rat or a ghoul cat or a ghoul bat, basically any animal that you can think of that is doing a lot of work for you. You may tap into the bat's eyes and scout the environment, send your little animal friend to the surface. You stay in the sewers, but you see the world through your animal's eyes. It's very useful in both survival and espionage. Now, obfuscate allows NOSFERATU to hide in the shadows, allows them also to hide their deformities and appear just like any other human being. This discipline is frowned upon by some NOSFERATU who feel like it should be a pride for NOSFERATU to show their malformed visage, because this is a part of them and they should embrace it fully. But of course, it's a very useful tool for many, and many NOSFERATU resort to using it very often. Now, potence is the last discipline that they do have natively. Potence allows them to have this inhuman strength, and this is the discipline which they very rarely use in front of kine, and it's not very often used on kine as well. NOSFERATU stereotypically rarely hurt kine, and potence would basically destroy a human with a single punch. Now, I talked already about their bane. It changed throughout the editions, so nowadays your appearance doesn't actually cause the Masquerade breach just when a kine will see you on the street, which I think is fair because it was a pretty hardcore bane in comparison to other banes of other clans. NOSFERATUs were very much more cursed than any other clan because of how much exiled they were from the society. They also have the compulsion, so something that is triggered by a particular events, particular traumas, particular bad rolls of your dice. And their compulsion is called cryptophilia, and it's basically the hunger for information and secrets. Once it's triggered, the hunger for secrets and information of a NOSFERATU is comparable to their hunger of blood. They need to get the last piece of the puzzle, and they will do anything just to do it. Anyway, with the modern rules for the clan NOSFERATU and a lot of examples of them that you have in both video games and the books, I think they are a very broad clan to play, and there may be a lot of different ways to tackle it as a player. And that was the video about Clan NOSFERATU. I hope it was informative, and I can't wait to see you in the next clan videos. Let me know in the comments down below which clan would you like to hear about the most. Thank you very much for listening, and remember, don't get lost in the night. Good night.